The rules of civil procedure do not apply to we the people. And why I'm saying that to everybody right now,
No,
this
wait a minute.
incredible...
Stop right there because you talk really fast. So
Sorry.
it's okay. So what are the rules of civil procedure and why is that important? What is that? Because that is the key linchpin to what you're saying about how they don't apply to us. What are they and what do we think they apply to?
Well, what happened was is that the rules of civil procedure, quite simply, these are rules that are promulgated. They're written by a society to which I and pretty much 99.9% of the people do not belong to, called the bar. Okay? The rules of civil procedure are being used in our public courthouses to block people like myself, or if Sherry wished to move her claim in court. That's what I'm saying. That's why this is so important. When you look into who's actually writes the rules of civil procedure and where my information is backed up on this, my website is awarriorcalls.com, case file number 2. I established the first time in Canada's history, 4 of them actually. One of them is called the Suklesky Court in September 12th, 2020. And it was drilling down. It was a man with an estate act. You don't need to understand that. But what we drilled down on is that there was 8 lawyers and there was 2 justices that were pillaging this man's estate. And what were they using? Well, they're using the Estate Act. They were using the Rules of Civil Procedure and the Justice Act. People need to understand that the government of Canada or the government of Ontario, what are they? They're service corporations, no different than McDonald's or Tim Hortons. So is anything that they put pen to paper, any of their agents or officers, does that apply to Christopher or Sherry? No, unless there's a contract between us. Contract makes the law. So I started, again, through learning from the pension case. When I saw this corruption that was going on, I wanted to know, how do I hold these people that act as lawyers accountable? Nobody ever sees lawyers arrested. Nobody ever sees judges arrested. The judge was corrupt as well that was in on this. I've got all evidence. So how do you hold them accountable? The police are completely ignorant on this because they only understand one thing. They understand a legal world. They don't understand there's a lawful world. They've not been trained on that. And that's where the rules of civil procedure come in. The rules of civil procedure, when you look into it, who writes them? Well, it's a man that acts as Attorney General for a service corporation called Ontario. And then there's a few other people that are bar members that also write them. They may wear the black robes, but we, the people, we have nothing to do with that. And that's why people need to understand a powerful word. It's a public courthouse, not a private courthouse. So when we go to our public courthouse to move a claim of trespass, that's against a man or a woman, we are being blocked. This is what's been going on for a long time. We're blocked from moving that claim forward because we're not moving under the rules of civil procedure. This is what the people in the black robes are wearing. And now, so I drilled down it. My evidence of this now is I went after, I filed a claim on September the 12th against 8 people that act as bar members and 2 justices. So 10 people with Michael Suklesky. And then when they didn't answer the information, when we went at them for 8 months, produced the evidence because they're not allowing Michael to move his claim in court against these lawyers and justices who are stealing and pillaging his father's pension or his estate. See, his father went to leave Michael a will. But for 2 years, he tried to leave a will before he died. But all the bar members says, you can't do it that way, sir, because it's not falling under the Estate Act. See? And he wanted to leave a substantial amount to Michael, his only son. So what happened was that Michael found all this out. All these lawyers were pillaging the fund using what? On their billing is based on the rules of civil procedure. It's all in their filing. So we went at them for 7 months, produced the evidence, right up the chain. They didn't do it. So then what we did do? We went right to the top chain in Canada. The man acting as Chief Justice of Canada, the woman acting as Chief Justice of Ontario. These are the 2 top people that are supposed to be overseeing the service corporation agents that act as judges. Remember, they're all working for a service corporation here. If you ask any judge, Sherry, when you walk into a court, you say, excuse me, after you require their name, you say, do you have jurisdiction over a man or woman? And they're going to avoid that question like the plague because they don't. They're our employees, not our employers. And this is what I started to learn, right?
Slow down. Go back to that because that's a really, really critically important point. What you just kind of, and this is, I do this sometimes myself that I have to kind of slow down because I'm super familiar with all the vaccine stuff. And so it just rolls out of me and, like at full steam ahead. And so you're super familiar with this concept. And this is stuff that's new to like a lot of people. So I think it's and what you just said is really pivotal in terms of because I feel like one of the problems that we have right now in the US, and I suppose other places across the world is, at least my perspective of here in the US is like, who do we appeal to? Right? I mean, if we had 80 federal judges, 80 federal judges here in the US that refused to look at evidence. They didn't refuse to make a ruling. They just didn't even want to see the evidence, 80. And then we had the US Supreme Court say, no, thanks, we're not interested. And now we know Congress is bought off. We know the state legislators are bought off. The governors are now acting as little fiefdom kings and queens. And so we, the people, are like, hey, we see what's going on here. Who do we appeal our case to? And I think that that's where you're kind of going with this, is to say,
Yeah.
we can't go over there under the rules of civil procedure, hire a lawyer that goes into court to try to appeal the case of we, the commoners out here, because it doesn't apply to us. I think I understand that correctly, right?
Yeah,
And then,
it's really simple.
and,
Legal,
and
all
then,
lawyers operate.
and then you need, so please take us through that from there. I mean, where do we go? What do we need to know about that? And where do we go from there?
Yeah, thank you, Sherry, and you're absolutely right. I apologize. I realize that I am submersed in this all the time. So let me make it real simple.
Okay.
Legal doesn't apply to a man or woman. That's the first fact. Okay? Lawyers do not represent people. They represent them. And you say, well, what do they represent them as, Christopher? Well, when we're born, we didn't talk about this quickly. There's a trespass that occurs, and this happens right around the world. That's why this truth is so powerful. When I was born and I came into this world, this is known as a statement of birth, right? That the government, it's just a record. This is the hospital record in here, but it's inside a template. They go and make a bond from this. But ultimately what happens is this is just a record. What happens after this, Sherry, like all of us get several weeks later, we get what's known as a birth certificate that comes in the mail, okay? This is verification. This is evidence of a trespass that occurs against every man and woman. I teach everyone the power of 3 words: trespass, property, and who. When you're born, okay, these service corporations, what they're doing is they kill you on paper, unbeknownst to you, your mother and father and all the hospital staff, and they create a legal person. That's what this represents, a legal person. And he who creates owns. So when you're walking into a public courthouse, all right, these lawyers, they're operating in a legal world, right? So who created this? This would be your, in my case, it's the Ontario government created this. That's why it's in their Ontario courts. The Queen, who created all these crown corporations, he who creates, owns, and controls.
Wait,
So
slow down. Say that again. That's really key. He who
yeah,
creates.
Controls and owns, right? So I had nothing to do with the creation of this birth certificate. And what you're actually...
So if the government creates a legal fiction, just for clarification for people that are listening, because they're going, wow, this is so fast. So when the government creates a legal fiction, we're born, we get after we're born, they send in a piece of paper that gives us a birth certificate. A birth certificate is a legal fiction, all capital letters, legal fiction, that now they have created this thing that doesn't belong to the living person. And now that they've created this entity, they own it, right?
Yeah, and the key word you said there is person. We never refer to each other as a person. Now, when I have this conversation today, I said, I met Sherry today, we had a wonderful interview, hopefully, and she's a wonderful person. Well, I'm speaking about the wonderful woman in front of me, but that doesn't operate in the legal world. Remember, legal only applies to that which is incorporated. Full stop. Go look at your birth certificate and look at the name. It's in all capital letters. That's a service corporation that was created in your name without your consent. Okay, and on the back of it in Canada here, there's a CUSIT number. On my website, there's 4 short foundational videos you need to watch, and that will walk everybody through at awarriorcalls.com the trespass that's occurred against us when we're born. See, when we're born, Sherry, we come into this world with all our God-given unalienable rights. The law of this world comes from our Creator. And the word law is not a pretty word. It stands for 3 things: land, air, water. 3 jurisdictions.
Oh, wow.
So what do lawyers trained in? They're trained in admiralty maritime law, law of the sea. Common law is the law of the land. I was born on the land, but the second that I was born, a service corporation, when something is registered, see, it says, when you talk about that word certificate, what's a certificate? A certificate is something that is deposited. And it says right at the very bottom of my birth certificate, and I show it on my website, it says Canadian banknote. See, people have not been shown what's actually been going on here. It's massive fraud. This is why Sherry, this is why Judy Mikovits, Dolores Cahill, I've talked to intensely about what's going on and why they can't get this truth into the courts is because they're accessing their public courthouses in the wrong capacity. They're going in as under a legal person instead of accessing it as a man or a woman. Because when you access it as a man or a woman, that's when it gets the rules of civil procedure pushed out of the way. Because words on a piece of paper, Sherry, do not bind a man or woman to it unless what? Our wet signatures on it in a contract or we've consented to it. And this is the ultimate thing that the people have been unaware of, because when you understand 2 things in law destroy any court. That's if fraud is ever apparent from conception to the final ruling, or what's the other thing? The wrong jurisdiction. Now take a step back and realize that every single court case, not every, there's obviously the lawyers are there for contractual, large corporations. That's what they're there for. They have no business dealing with people, because when you go in there, they don't represent you. They represent you as this fiction that was created. And that fiction is controlled by these people wearing the black robes. When you move your own court, this is what you learned from the Sukleski court. A man was accessing his public courthouse. He was moving a simple claim of trespass against people from a society he didn't belong to, who were using all these acts, codes, and statutes that had nothing to do with him to steal from him. And the bar is terrified, because when the world realizes that every single court cases that we've been dragged into, we've been misrepresented, right? It's massive constructive. That's why it's an unlawful conversion, what happens when we're born. It takes you from a lawful stand as a man or woman when we come into this world. And remember, we are the creators of this world. We created government, and then government went and created, police, court systems, judges, etc. But what they went and did is they created a legal person underneath them. And that's what's being, basically ruled over and administrated over in these public courthouses. And it's all fraud.
So how do we get out from underneath our legal fiction? How do we, and here's the thing, because I've studied not to your level, of course, but I've been involved in this sort of discussion about these topics for 20 years, maybe longer. And it's always been an enigma to me to know all of this stuff. And I've always felt it was an interesting, I always felt it was absolutely accurate. But I've never been able to, and oh gosh, it's endless. It's a whole nother conversation. All the different people I've been involved with and things. I mean, how do you move out from underneath it and at the same time still operate in society? How do you come out from underneath your straw man legal fiction that's on your driver's license, your passport, your credit cards, your bank accounts? I mean, how do you move out from underneath that, become that sovereign human being, individual? Who am I as a sovereign individual human being, and not this legal fiction that they created? How do we get out from underneath it, and be able to operate in society? Because to me, all the people I've talked to, all the different discussions all the classes, my husband, God rest his soul, used to be so involved in this stuff. I mean, Kevin passed away 7 years ago, and this was a major thing that he and one of his really, really good friends from California spent an enormous amount of time on it. And I would hear them over here talking about it, so I would kind of take it in peripherally. And I used to say, well, yeah, but so what? I mean, if somebody comes and kicks in my front door and I go, wait a minute, excuse me, I don't operate in that system. I'm not this straw man legal fiction. How do you operate in society and not be underneath that?
Well, you're absolutely right. This is the problem that everyone's faced with, because of this unlawful conversion that happens. As you know, that every home that you've bought, car, land, what identification did you use, right? You use this stuff that came to you from the service corporations called government. So this is why we don't own anything technically on title. And in the United States, there's an incredible woman, Anna von Reitz, which she set up as the land record system to do exactly what you're talking about right now around the world. It's also international, that you can correct the records. But right now, the focus for me is why I came forward at this time, is because we don't have time for everybody to learn how to, that's all going to happen in the very near future once we correct it. We have to get access to this public courthouse correctly. And the bar, these members of the society we don't belong to, are blocking we the people, like yourself, like Judy and Dolores, that have this evidence. It'd be over like that. So what I've drilled down onto is I'm sharing with the world right now, they need to come all to the table. We need to basically surround our public courthouses with law enforcement who are learning about this now as well, because they've been calling everyone freemen on the land, sovereign citizens. They've all been uneducated. They don't understand the difference between legal and lawful, right? Legal applies to this, this corporate structure, if you're in their world, but the lawful side, that's why our courthouses are a mess today, because no one has been accessing them properly. And that's what I showed everyone that I've done here in Canada. I've accessed it. This began 9 months ago with Michael, and we established the first common law court in Canada. And then once you saw that they were not coming forward, blocking us from accessing this courthouse using the rules of civil procedure, when we're saying, wait a minute, they don't apply to us, because they know that once this truth gets brought into, all of this corruption stops instantly. And this is what the police are all looking for. There's no remedy in dealing with lawyers. Look, if the world was so great with this justice system that we have around us, as you so eloquently talked about, look what's just happened with the Supreme Court in the United States. with the elections, right? They're not doing their jobs, their basic jobs. And this is what people are seeing. Oh my God, it's because there's a private society that's infested our public courthouses. And because we've been not given this foundational truth when we were born of the unlawful trespass, we don't know the difference between legal and lawful. And once people understand that simple truth, that's when our public courthouses come into effect. And the reason you say it's public is because every man and woman in a public courthouse, Sherry, has duties and obligations. They're there to provide good faith duties and services to we the people. Duties and obligations do not trump the rights of a man or a woman. I'll say this powerful. Service corporations do not write law. Full stop. Just think about that for a second. No service corporation can write law in this world. We all know that. Well, what is Ontario doing? What is your state governor doing? These are all service corporations. These are people that are supposed to be our employees writing these laws, and through this legal corruption that we've had in our consciousness, we don't understand what is going on. And now that people do, they realize the massive fraud that's been going on in our public courthouses, and the bar is terrified. And this is going to happen, I think, in the next couple of months. We're finally going to get it done, because the world is starting to see now with these two. What happened, I should tell you, is that after the claim went in on September the 12th, and these lawyers and that didn't answer the questions, they started attacking it. Why? To throw it out of the public courthouse because it's not falling under the rules of civil procedure. So I took it right up the chain. The Chief Justice of Canada and Ontario hit them with 3 notices, say, produce the evidence upon which you rely. We're honorable people here. If we've misread something here, that's a public courthouse, not a private courthouse. They all acquiesced. Nobody provided the evidence. So now it's with the OPP, which is the provincial police here in Canada. The chief is also the local police officer, Stephen Tanner. They just got the communications last week. Why? Because now these 2 lawyers, these 2 people acting as justices that were actually being sued, have thrown it out of the court now. And they've said it's all vexatious, it's all based on fraud, what we're bringing forward, there's no validity here. This is what they use against us. Well, that's not for them to decide, because I know damn well, Sherry, that the second that this gets produced in front of a jury of our peers, that's what the common law is. When you come into a public courthouse, you have a right to access it and move a claim, and your court, simply outside of a legal society, you never use their forms. The second you use their forms in the courthouse, you get dragged into the rules of civil procedure. So all my filings went in not using any legal forms. They're all legitimate. They're all verified, but the bar wouldn't have any of it because they knew that this is going to expose finally the corruption that's going on in our courts.
So if they toss it out, Christopher, how do we get it implemented? I mean, this is where I've always struggled with all of these things. I mean, they've got the ultimate gavel, to say, it's fraudulent filing, you don't have the right jurisdiction, it's all conspiracy theory nonsense, blah 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 blah. So what are you doing that's going to correct that piece of it? How is that going to be different?
Well, the truth is the most important thing. And now, see, this is why what I've been doing, I set out to launch this website back in 2019, Sherry. And, again, I didn't realize, I knew that they were going to do something through my vast knowledge and research, obviously, to understand what's going on in this world. Once I lost my life's work, people understand that now. I had to learn right across the full spectrum, from health, from financing to law, what is actually going on in our world. And when I understood finally what was going on, I realized that the solution is, first and foremost, that people must be educated. And this whole thing with COVID-19, this has been the perfect, storm for them, but it's also been a great vehicle for me because everyone now realizes something's wrong. And now people aren't saying this is conspiracy theory because they're seeing my verified evidence now. This man has launched 2 claims. Actually, there's 4. There's a Pahar court that's out in British Columbia where I'm taking down the Service Corporation, the top people there that are implementing all these things as well. See, in the lawful world, Sherry, you don't sue corporations. Rocco Galante, who I think the world of in Canada here, he's launched a 191-page claim. He launched it back in September, I think it was, of last year. Where is it going? Nowhere. And when he refers to the word court, whose court are we relying on here? See, all these lawyers have got their court system set up. When you stand outside and you move your court as a man or woman, they have no jurisdiction over it.
So do you think that the difference of how this is actually, because I agree with you, Michael, or Christopher, I'm getting your name all messed up this morning. I'm so sorry. Okay. Christopher, I agree with you. And like I said, I've spent decades also knowing about this, trying to figure it out, hoping that you would come along and to say, so is it a matter of numbers? I mean, does it mean that we get the general public educated, we get them up to speed, and we just go have our own court? Now, I understand that separation, and I get the difference between lawful and legal, which I think is really, really important because I think that most people think of those 2 things as synonyms, and they're not. And but at the end of the day, I mean, did the only way that I feel like we're going to have any success with this, or the ultimate success, let me say it that way, the ultimate success is the transformation and education of the enforcement arm,
Exactly.
of the police, of the military, of the IRS collection people. I mean, for those, and that has to be in massive numbers. I mean, I've watched all of these protests, and I see the police come in their yellow jackets and, pepper spray people and kick them down and all that stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, you're a human being. You live in this town too. Don't you want your freedoms? I mean, to me, it seems as though, Christopher, and this is Christopher James that we're talking to this morning, is that's the only way out. Am I wrong about that, or do you have
You're
a better idea?
You're absolutely right. See, it's a big topic we're talking about here, so let me let everybody know something. I recognize that the only way we're going to get this done is that we have to have law enforcement shoulder to shoulder with us going into these public courthouses and correct it, because our courthouses are completely filled with these corrupt parasites that are bar members. They are. Don't kid yourself. These people that are wearing the black robes, they have nothing to do with justice. They're about protecting what they've had for over 200 years now in this country, and they're scared that it's going to happen.